I never imagined my knack for keeping detailed records would unravel a web of deceit in my quiet suburban neighborhood, but that's exactly what happened last summer. My name is Ethan, and I've called Willow Creek Estates home for 5 years. It's a picturesque community with manicured lawns, a sparkling pool, and an HOA led by the most infuriating woman I've ever met, Deborah Langley. From the moment I moved in, Deborah made it clear she ruled the roost. As HOA president, she brandished her authority like a scepter, patrolling the streets with a notepad, ready to pounce on any infraction: a hedge trimmed an inch too short, a car parked a hair off-center. At monthly meetings, she'd lecture us about upholding property values, her voice dripping with self-righteous superiority, her icy stare silencing anyone bold enough to challenge her. As your president, she'd say, lips curling into a smile that never reached her eyes, I'm simply protecting our community's best interests. But we all knew the truth. Deborah thrived on control, relishing the power to make her neighbors squirm. I managed to steer clear of her wrath until last spring, when I decided to paint my front door a rich charcoal gray. I wasn't reckless. I pored over the HOA bylaws, confirming neutral colors were allowed. Half a dozen homes already sported similar shades. I submitted the required form, waited the mandatory 2 weeks, and hearing nothing, proceeded per the rules, which stated silence equaled approval. The paint was barely dry when my doorbell rang. There stood Deborah, clad in her usual taupe blazer, arms crossed, oversized sunglasses perched like a crown atop her head. Ethan, she said, her voice sharp as a blade, that door color hasn't been approved by the architectural committee. Her smile was all teeth, no warmth. I calmly explained I'd followed protocol, offering to show her my dated submission. I never received any paperwork, she snapped, waving a dismissive hand. Repaint it immediately, or you'll face $50 daily fines. Her tone carried the smug certainty of someone who always got her way. I bit my tongue, nodded, and said, I'll handle it. I'd learned long ago that arguing with Deborah was like wrestling a pig in mud. It'd get dirty, and she'd enjoy it. Instead, I emailed the HOA treasurer, Greg, to confirm my submission. Within hours, he replied, verifying my request was logged. Armed with proof, I assumed the matter was settled. 3 days later, I found a violation notice taped to my charcoal door, demanding $154. Unapproved modifications. Worse, it claimed I owed $450 in unpaid quarterly dues, a blatant lie. My bank statements showed every payment cleared on time. A chill ran through me. This wasn't just Deborah's usual pettiness. Something was deeply wrong. Suspecting foul play, I drafted a formal letter disputing the claims, attaching my submission receipt and bank records. I sent it to every board member, not just Deborah. The next morning, my phone rang. How dare saw you go over my head? Deborah's voice was a venomous hiss, skipping any pretense of civility. You're undermining my authority. I kept my tone even. I'm just clarifying a misunderstanding. That only stoked her fury. There's no misunderstanding, she spat. Our records show you're delinquent, and now you're stirring up trouble because you got caught. The board's ready to place a lien on your property unless you pay by month's end. A lien? For fabricated fines and dues I'd already paid? This had escalated beyond petty tyranny. Deborah, I said, my voice steady but firm, I have proof of payment. If your records differ, maybe we need an independent audit of the HOA's books. The line went silent, her confidence faltering for the first time. That won't be necessary, she finally muttered, her tone clipped. I'll review the records, but don't think this excuses that unapproved door. Her retreat only deepened my suspicions. I started talking to neighbors, and a disturbing pattern emerged. Several had faced similar issues: mysterious late fees, missing payment records, even threats of liens, all orchestrated by Deborah. One neighbor, Clara, confessed she'd paid an extra $900 after Deborah Convine said her she was behind, despite automatic bank drafts. The stories were too consistent to be coincidence. I took action. I submitted a formal request for 3 years of HOA financial records, which the bylaws required them to provide. Deborah stalled, claiming the files were being organized and wouldn't be ready for weeks. Undeterred, I contacted our bank, requesting statements for every check I'd written to the HOA. What I found was jaw-dropping. My payments had been cashed, but several were deposited into an account not listed on our official payment slips. I shared this with Greg, who was visibly shaken. I only track what's deposited into the main account, he admitted. Deborah handles some deposits herself and gives me the slips. I had no idea about another account. Together, we combed through the records he could access, cross-referencing them with payments neighbors confirmed. The discrepancies were staggering. Nearly $40,000 had vanished over 2 years, collected but never recorded in the HOA's books. With this bombshell, the board's VYC president called an emergency meeting, deliberately excluding Deborah. The evidence was damning. Deborah had been running a sophisticated scam, issuing false late notices, strong-arming residents into paying duplicate dues, and funneling checks into a secret account she alone controlled. The board voted unanimously to oust her and report the matter to the police. They froze all HOA accounts, changed signatories, and hired a forensic accountant to trace the missing funds. Deborah didn't go quietly. When notified of her removal, she stormed to my house, mascara-streaked tears streaming down her face, her voice loud enough to draw neighbors' stares. "How could you do this to me?" she wailed. "I've poured my heart into this community, and you've destroyed everything." I stood in my doorway, my charcoal door gleaming behind me, and replied evenly. "The board acted on evidence, Deborah. This isn't personal." Her tears vanished, replaced by fury. "Evidence!" she shrieked. "Those records were a disaster before I took over. I was fixing things." I met her gaze. "The police will sort it out." I shut the door as she ranted on my porch, her words echoing through the cul-de-sac. 2 days later, the neighborhood watched, curtains parted, as police escorted Deborah from her home in handcuffs. She sobbed theatrically, collapsing against the cruiser as if starring in her own tragedy. The charges were severe: embezzlement, fraud, falsifying records, and theft by deception. The investigation uncovered she'd siphoned $82,000 over 4 years, squandering it on VYSH cruises and designer handbags her modest income couldn't sustain. 6 months later, I sat in the courtroom for her sentencing. The judge's voice was unyielding: 3 years in prison, full restitution, and a $30,000 fine. Deborah's perfectly styled hair hung limp, her face pale with shock. "I was just borrowing it," she whispered as the bailiff approached, her voice breaking. "I was going to pay it back." Her pleas faded as she was led away, still unable to grasp how her thirst for power and greed had unraveled her carefully curated life. As for my charcoal door, it still stands, bold and unapologetic, a quiet testament to the truth. Sometimes, the smallest acts of defiance can expose the deepest betrayals. Willow Creek is healing, but Deborah's scandal lingers, a cautionary tale whispered at every neighborhood barbecue. Justice, it seems, can paint a neighborhood in shades of gray and make it all the more vibrant for it.